here at Meewasin. Thank you all for coming today for our first webinar this year. We are so excited for Kelton to be presenting. Since there are a lot of people who are either not from Saskatoon or new to Saskatoon, I'm going to do a short little Meewasin 411 and mention some volunteer conservation that we do here at Meewasin. So sorry, everything's just popping up all at once. So like I said, my name's Katie. I work at Meewasin. Meewasin is the steward of the South Saskatchewan River Valley. Sorry, before I get started, I'll just ask everybody to mute their microphones, just so there's no extra chattering in the background. That's awesome. Thank you so much. Meewasin is the steward of the South Saskatchewan River Valley Valley corridor in and around Saskatoon region. The word Meewasin comes from the Cree word Meewasin, meaning beautiful. The beautiful Meewasin Valley is located on Treaty 6 territory and on the traditional homeland of the Métis people. We acknowledge this, and as part of our organization's effort towards reconciliation and honor the vast knowledge held by traditional caretakers of the land as we steward it today. So our next slide, we'll talk about quickly the 100-year plan. Meewasin was founded from a study that was conducted in 1978 by Raymond Moriyama, who you see on the screen there. Moriyama and his team came to Saskatoon and surveyed the land, water, and air and saw the potential that Saskatoon had to protect the river valley. The 100-year plan is a beautifully written document that Moriyama and his team designed and wrote. Moriyama's also designed some really prolific buildings in Canada and around the world, such as the Bata Museum in Toronto, the War Museum in Ottawa, and the Canadian Embassy in Japan. Moriyama said the 100-year plan is his cathedral, and to quote him, Meewasin Valley is closer to a cathedral than a cathedral itself. So sorry about the hazy images. Hopefully it's all clear in the screen. It should hopefully just be on my end. Okay. Good to know. With Meewasin's mission and mandate, Meewasin Valley Authority exists to ensure a healthy and vibrant river valley with a balance between human and conservation use. So providing leadership in the management of its resources, promoting and understanding conservation and beneficial use of the valley, and undertaking programs and projects in the river valley development and conservation for future and present generations. We help conserve 6,700 hectares of land and provide free public access and educate on the importance of conserving the natural and cultural resources and develop respecting natural landscapes. That brings us to our jurisdiction. So like I mentioned, Meewasin's jurisdiction runs 75 kilometers along the river, and it's a vast area, about the size of 13,000 Canadian football fields. So it's quite large. Conservation is something we also strive at Meewasin. So less than 14% of grasslands remain in Saskatchewan, and Meewasin uses an integrated approach to combat invasive species management, including burning and grazing. But we're going to be talking about plantings. So in 2022, we conducted over 7,000 plantings of trees, shrubs, and wildflowers across the Meewasin Valley. And Meewasin also has one of the largest greenhouses of native plant species in the province, and our goal is to triple plant production. So the greenhouse and seed bank, one of the largest greenhouses of native plants in Saskatchewan, and Kelton will be talking about how to incorporate native plants in your garden as we go. So we created a space to connect, and we want to create a space to connect ours and support culture and learn more about the environment. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Kelton quickly, and then stop sharing my screen. Awesome. So Kelton is an environmental educator here at Meewasin, and he has always had a love of plants and their pollinators, so much so that he's completed a Master of Science degree in biology at the U of S. Kelton works at Beaver Creek Conservation Area and is always happy to talk about plants and bugs. So Kelton, it is all yours to share your screen and talk more about the wonderful world of winter gardening.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Katie. Katie, can you give me a thumbs up if you can hear me? And can you also give me a thumbs up or I can't, I must have muted. Oh, there you are. It's just loading in here. Um, can you see it, Katie? And is it clear? Okay, sweet. All right, I'm gonna minimize all everybody's video because I don't want to see me. Um, all right, well, welcome everybody. Thanks so much, Katie, for that introduction. My name is Kelton. I'm excited to talk about gardening in the wintertime. It's a pretty chilly week, so it's exciting to think about what could be and talk about how to use native plants in your garden. So to start off, um, oh, okay. Why use native plants? There's a lot of really great reasons. First of all, our native plants are already adapted to our local climate. They've evolved here, so that really helps with drought as well. We've had a lot of, excuse me, dry summers lately, and so all of our native species have incredible root systems. They're able to access water or store it potentially and deal with drought. So it will lead to less watering for you, which will save you money in the long run. They're also less maintenance once established. Kind of goes hand in hand with that watering. They're kind of can just take care of themselves. And of course, they provide a food and place to live for our pollinators, our birds, and a lot of other creatures. And they're a lot easier for pollinators and other things to access the pollen and nectar within the flowers. There's a lot of like plants you buy at the greenhouse can be like double flowers. Any gardeners might be familiar with them, where some of the inner parts inside the petal of the flowers have been through like testing and genetics and breeding have been turned into petals. So it's harder, there's more stuff in the way for the pollinators to get there. And also, it's some of those structures turned into petals were the structures like anthers that make pollen. So there's just less food available in general in a lot of our horticultural varieties. But with native species, the pollinators have evolved with them. So there's lots of food available and they know how to like work the flowers to be able to get the food efficiently. And also they're just beautiful all year round. You can see I've got a bunch of wildflowers there. They're all very pretty, and we'll hear about how I think they're beautiful even in winter. And throughout this talk, I want people to think about their yard, their or balcony or whatever as habitat. The prairies are one of the most endangered ecosystems in the whole world. There's very little prairies left, and so our yards can help out a lot of prairie species, plants and animals alike. And if people think of their yard not just as like a place to grow green grass, but as a place where you can have a little bit of that prairie or little, a few wildflowers or something, it can really help out the prairies as a whole. So your garden and winter. So even though people mostly think of wildflowers and native plants helping wildlife, including bugs in summertime, it can also really help them in wintertime. But that kind of starts back in fall. So there's this like idea or something that people leave the leaves on the ground in the fall instead of cleaning them up, putting them in bags or putting them in your compost bin. You can wait to like clean up your flower bed until springtime, if at all, because all those leaves are habitat. They're not garbage, they're not something to be thrown away. Things live in there all winter long. Even sometimes as they fall, they already have beneficial insect eggs on them. But all the insects you see on the side of the screen there overwinter in leaf litter, either as caterpillars or eggs, or sometimes that one bee in the middle can live in stems through the winter as eggs or as adults. And so if we cut down all the stems and throw away all the leaves in winter, all of these beneficial insects are really, you're just throwing them away basically. There's less home for them to live. And then also what you're throwing away are homes for insects that like to eat are more pesky ones like aphids. So there's a lot of ladybugs live in there, or ladybird beetles, and wasps that kill things like aphids um, live in that leaf litter through the winter. And if you're throwing it away, then you're going to have to apply more pesticides in the springtime. So if you leave it, you'll be kind of better off in general. And it's important also not to snip all the stems off, even if you do leave your leaves, because like I said, those are homes for a lot of creatures through the winter, but also it's something to look at. You can see my, on the bottom kind of center there is a picture of my yard in fall, a lot of seeds on these stems. And then the bottom right picture there are two photos from my friend Joanne's yard. She has a lot of native plants, and you can see them poking up through the snow. The photo in the center, the grass, is called Little Blue Stem, and in fall, its stems turn beautiful red color. Its seeds can like sparkle in the winter sun. They're really beautiful, and if you cut that all down, it's just something less to look at. You're just looking at a barren landscape. And so the more you have to look at in wintertime, the more pollinators you'll see in spring and through the summer. And I don't know about any of you, but I certainly can spend quite a long time watching the bees and moths and whatever else fly between flowers and just see what they're up to. It can also help birds out too, leaving all those stems with seeds on them. They are great for birds. I have a lot of plants up in my front flower bed, and we see birds getting seeds from them all the time. It's like a free bird feeder. Also, so if you're wanting to plant native plants, you will probably want to know what you're planting, and you need to know a little bit about identifying them. Any plant seller will tell you what you have, but it's important to know that what you're buying is native to this area. And I always find plant ID a lot of fun, just being able to see what's out there. There's a lot of great resources to help you make it really easy to identify plants. There's some online resources like Saskatchewan Wildflowers is a great website. Glenn Lee has taken incredible pictures of a lot of wildflowers and some shrubs. There's no real grasses on there or anything, but really excellent resource. They even have like an ID guide to kind of help you through. Also, an online resource would be iNaturalist, which I'll talk about a little bit later. And then also the Native Plant Society of Saskatchewan has tons of resources on their website, from how to grow plants, how to ID them, where to buy them. Really excellent. But if you want something a little more analog, something you can hold, there's a lot of great field guides. These are pretty general. All these could be probably used here, at least a little. Pretty general, but they can be great. They'll have all the common species that can help you ID them. If you want to get really into the weeds, you can use these floras. The Flora of Saskatchewan books are still being published, but they're super in depth. Bud's Flora is a little old, but if you want to get really into it, those are really helpful. And then finally, I wanted to mention Cultivating Our Roots by Nora Stewart is an incredible book. It's one of the few, if not maybe the only book I've seen that has pictures of native plant seedlings. If you plant seeds in the fall, it can be really hard to know when they come up in spring what's a native plant, what might be a weed or something you don't want to grow. So that book's really excellent. I really highly recommend people get that if they're wanting to grow native plants. Plant ID can also help sharpen your observation skills, kind of make you stop and smell the roses, or the willow in case of this picture. And you might notice other things that you didn't notice before. So if we were to stop and look at this willow and kind of zoom in, you'll see that bee is really orange and fuzzy. It's got pretty big antenna. And you can see that the willow flower structure there actually isn't just one big flower. It's a whole bunch of teeny tiny ones. and you can see different structures, which you wouldn't have noticed if you hadn't like looked a little closer. And then same thing, if you look even closer at that bee, on its backside there, you can see the picture. It's got a weird thing sticking out, and that's actually a little parasite that lives within it and hurts it just a little bit. But without looking closely, you wouldn't have noticed those things, which kind of leads me into plant blindness. Another, an idea that basically people think of plants as the background. That's where things live, but don't think of plants as living things themselves. So this picture here is taken off the deck of Beaver Creek Conservation Area, where I work primarily. And plant blindness is the idea that people would look out, see this beautiful view, but not think of all these plants as living organisms with their own stories and their own. They're quite interesting in and of themselves. And so learning about the plants can kind of lead to empathy and lead to how can you care about nature and the environment and what's around you if you don't know what's there, like this little carrion beetle. So without looking and knowing, you're not going to care about the environment, which is of course a big problem today. So leaving, oh no, iNaturalist. It's an excellent resource. If you haven't used it, there's an app, there's a website. Basically, you upload pictures. It will have, the website has like a guess of what the thing you uploaded might be. It doesn't have to be plants. You can see I have a caterpillar and some fungi there. And after you've uploaded, local experts or scientists will look at it and tell you if they think they agree with your identification or if they'll suggest something else. And then once enough people agree, it becomes what's called research grade. And then organizations like Meewasin, we use that in our work, but also scientists use it the world over. So you're contributing to science, but you're also helping yourself learn what's out there. And so if you want to actually plant some seeds, you've maybe learned a tiny bit about identifying them. There's a couple ways you can go about obtaining them. First is purchasing them. And when you're buying native seeds, you want to buy as local as possible to where you are. There's this concept known as ecotypes, where you have one species, let's say like yarrow. Common yarrow is a really widespread species, and it might grow up in the far north, but also might grow like in the central to southern states. And it grows here as well. And if you were to collect seeds from the plant in like South Carolina, plant it here, it probably won't survive our winters. But same thing, if you grab seeds from here, planted it South Carolina, it probably wouldn't survive their summers. And so if you buy seeds or plants from local producers, like I have listed there, you'll save money. You won't have to rebuy plants, and they'll hopefully grow for you. What kind of goes along with that is it's important not to buy, if you're purchasing seeds, like Mackenzie Seeds is one example, a big national seed company that sells like wildflower mixes. They sell it in the East Coast, the West Coast, they sell them here. It's the same mix. But of course, the growing season, the environments are very different, East Coast, West Coast, and here. And sometimes those seed mixes have something that grows fine in Ontario, but can be kind of invasive here in Saskatchewan. So if you want to buy a seed mix, I'd recommend buying it from one of the companies. I have their logos here. So Blazing Star and Prairie Bouquet are both local to Saskatoon. ALCLA is just north of Calgary. And then Prairie Originals and Skinner Native Seeds are out of Manitoba. So even going just like one province over is fine for like that's local enough. We have pretty similar environments through the Canadian prairies here. But yeah, just get as local as you can. I also have the Native Plant Society listed there. They, because every spring they publish a document that has it has like basically every native plant seller that's somewhat local, and they'll tell you if they sell plants or seeds or both, and if they sell to regular consumers like us or just on a big commercial scale. It's a really very thoroughly researched document, so I recommend taking a look at that when they publish it. in spring. You also have to make a decision if you want to buy plants or if you want to buy seeds. Pros and cons to both. Plugs or live plants are also called plugs. They're much more expensive. You're looking at like at least $5 per plant, and they're going to be pretty small. But of course, they'll grow a lot faster. They already have a root system. They'll get established a lot more quickly. Seeds are much cheaper, but they're going to take a lot longer to grow. And a lot of native plants don't have the best germination rates, so some of them might not come up. And if you're just broadcasting or like throwing seeds in an area, excuse me, the seeds might not come up exactly where you want them to, might come up slightly different. And as I said, it can be difficult to ID the seedlings and know what to pick and what to leave as you're kind of weeding in spring and summer. You can also collect seeds from the wild, although this comes with a lot of things to consider. Robin Wall Kimmerer kind of championed or popularized the idea of the honorable harvest. And there's a few key points to that. So you want to make sure if you're collecting seeds, you're never taking seeds from the first plant you see, never from the last. You want to take only what you need, harvest the plants or the seeds in a way that minimizes harm, and never waste what you're taking. Something that goes along with that is at most in an area, you want to harvest 10% of the seeds that are there, and no more. So it's a lot of things to consider as you're harvesting. And it doesn't hurt to ask permission before collecting is more of a spiritual sense. Like I'm not a very spiritual person, but I think it is a nice idea to thank the plant, thank the land for giving you the seeds that you have there. There's also a lot of legal considerations. So you can only collect seeds from certain areas. You can collect seeds from land that you own. That's fine. You own that land. If it's private land, you have to ask permission of the landowner. If it's public land, the answer will be no, but it doesn't hurt to ask. And with wherever you're collecting, you have to keep in mind those kind of ethical considerations that I talked about on the last slide. And it's very important to never dig up wild plants. In a lot of cases, it's illegal. And at best, you're going to be harming the plants surrounding the one you're digging up. You can hurt the root systems of the surrounding plants. The plant you dig up might not survive. So if you want live plants, just buy them from a reputable native plant seller. A few other things to go with collecting seeds. It's very time consuming because you have to go to where you're collecting multiple times through the year. So you're going to have to go when they're flowering, the plants are flowering, to identify them correctly, make sure you're collecting what you want to. Then you have to go back and collect them when the seeds are like ready to be picked. And when they're ready to be picked really depends on the weather leading up to that time. So you want to make sure they're ripe, but not so ripe that the plant has started to disperse them. And if you pick them too early, then they're just not going to grow for you. So it's tricky, but it's possible. And then once you've picked the seeds, you have to clean them. A lot of them have capsules or pods on them that have to be taken off before you can plant them. For example, purple prairie clover. This is a plant I collected some seeds from my front flower bed, and they have purple prairie clover is a legume, so it has a little pod on each seed that you have to remove to really increase the chance of it germinating. And so I spent for I don't know, at most 5 grams of seed, I probably spent a couple hours rubbing seeds between 2 pieces of sandpaper just to get that pod off so they could actually be grown. So it's very time consuming, but if you don't consider your time valuable, it's much cheaper than buying seeds. Once you have seeds, whether you bought them or collected them, they need to be stored until you're ready to plant them. Typically, you're not going to get them and then throw them right in the ground. And this should always be done in paper. Even when you buy them, they're always going to be stored in a paper bag or paper bag container. And it should be dry and cold. Plastic bags are just going to accumulate humidity on the inside and can lead to mold. And even if you store your seeds in paper, if you put it in your like kitchen fridge, it's going to be open and closed a lot. That can lead, that increase and then decrease in humidity back and forth will lead to moisture developing inside the seed packets, even if they're paper. So best to put it somewhere cold where that's not going to be opened a lot for a lot of time. And then once you're ready to plant them, some seeds need special treatments before they'll germinate. So some need what's called a scarification, where the seeds need to be physically scratched or stuffed before they'll germinate. So some examples I've written there, those are the pictures of them on the other side. And this is different than seed cleaning. It might look the same, but like the purple prairie clover I was talking about before, I was rubbing it between sandpaper to get rid of the seed pod on the outside. But sometimes other seeds, like the scarlet mallow, you could do something similar, rub the seeds between the sandpaper to actually scratch them before they'll germinate. Sometimes other seeds need a cold stratification. So they need a cold period before they'll actually germinate, which kind of makes sense if you think about how it happens in nature. So a lot of wildflowers drop their seeds in fall. They spend all winter under the snow, cold, maybe slightly damp, and then will germinate in spring. And there's different methods that you can achieve this with seeds that you've purchased. One is to plant them in fall, but if you haven't done that already, it's January, so it's too late. Another thing is what I have pictured here, you can mix seeds in very slightly damp sand. Some wildflower companies will sell that, the sand separate, and then you put it in the fridge for like a month or two, and that mimics that cold period, and they should be good to go, but don't put it in your kitchen fridge. Alternatively, you can use milk jugs, which we'll talk about in just a little bit. I have some examples listed there of different seeds that need cold treatment. And then some plants like prairie rose, its seeds need 2 cold periods before they'll germinate. So when they drop their seeds, it needs 2 winters before they'll grow in the wild. So don't get discouraged if you're using seeds to grow, and after a year or even 2 you don't get much coming up, or you don't get everything coming up. Hopefully it'll still come later. And then to actually sow the seeds, there's a few different ways you can do it. Some they don't need any treatment, you can just plant them and they'll grow. I've done this personally with western bergamot, but blue flax and pasture sage should work just as well. If you're planting them outside, you can just kind of rake up the soil, loosen it, put them on the soil, and then little over top and kind of squish it down. Good soil seed contact. And sometimes if you're seeding a big-ish area, even like a full flower bed, you might want to break up all your seeds into like 4 or 5 littler bags and space that out over your area, so that when you do it evenly throughout the whole thing. You're not just wasting a bunch in one area and then other areas are pretty thin. And then milk jugs, I'll talk about that and how you can use those to grow native plants. So I should mention that I learned about this from Wild About Saskatchewan. They have a video that's very in-depth about this on their YouTube page. I also volunteer for them in my spare time. So if you want a really in-depth video on how to do all this, go to their YouTube page and you'll find it. So I'll just quickly go through this. So if you have some extra milk jugs, clean them out. And then before you're planting, you want to draw a line all around the outside, just below the handle. And then at that time, you also want to cut some holes in the bottom. And then you want to cut around the outside, except for just below the handle. So you can have kind of like a hinge. And then you want to fill it most of the way with soil, maybe just like an inch or a few centimeters below. And I'm going to try to really quickly stop sharing, and maybe you'll be able to see me big. I have some milk jugs here. So you just want to draw a line around the edge. You want to cut that. I've also be able to see some holes in the bottom. And then once you have it cut, you want to do not quite everything, but most of it, and then fill it with soil till a little bit below. And then you want to grab your seed packets. I have a few different ones here from Blazing Star Wildflowers. And then on the back of the packets, a lot of them, let's take this prairie cone flower, for example. On the back, it'll say how deep you should plant them. This one says 5 to 10 millimeters. A lot of them won't need to be very deep at all. So you just sprinkle them on the top, put some more soil on top, and then you can seal it up. I'm going to try and go back to my thing. Did that work? Oh. Aha, okay. I think this is working. Katie, tell me if it's not. So you want to look at the packet, and then afterwards, you sprinkle the seeds in, put the soil on, and I always like to label something that goes inside the milk jug, just because I'll label the outside as well, but if you don't label inside, sometimes, it's easy in winter for stuff to get wrecked and you might lose what you've written on the outside. So then once you've done that, you can see the finished product on the right-hand side. You want to tape around the outside, kind of seal it up a little bit. And then you want to put it somewhere in your yard that is like the last place to lose snow, or it keeps snow the longest in your yard. Set it outside, give it some water every month so it doesn't dry out. And then as it warms in spring, it'll melt, thaw out. You might want to water it a little more frequently. They'll germinate all by themselves. Once they have, you can kind of pop the lid open. And once they get a little bigger, they get their first true leaves, you can pot them up into a little pot or a solo cup or something, and then plant them in the ground, and hopefully they'll grow happy and healthy for you. And again, if you want a more in-depth video explanation of that, go to the Wild About Saskatchewan YouTube page. And quickly, I wanted to show you an example of my front yard. We turned it into a native plant garden like 3 summers ago. Just want to quickly take you through the steps we did. So you can see I have my seed mixes. In the center there, all of those little packets just was a tiny amount of seed, but it was relatively costly. And so I got my seeds in April or May, and I was really impatient and wanted to plant them right away. And so I mixed it with a little bit of damp sand, put it in the fridge for a month and a half or so. Then I was able to plant them. And we also planted some wildflower plugs because I wanted it to look like something, but I also wanted the diversity that seed mix would provide. And so here I am prepping it. My friend Michael Skinner, him and his family run Skinner Native Seeds out of Manitoba, and he told me that he runs a course called Prairie Garden Seeds, and Prairie Garden Native Prairie Restoration. That's what I call it, Native Prairie Restoration. There's a course, you can still sign up. It's super helpful. It talks about restoring plants, prairies at a big like field scale, but also even just in a little yard like this. And he told me that a sod cutter works excellent in a small space to prep the site. So that's all prepped there. And then this was after, so we planted in June, and the next spring, that's what it looked like. Everything was starting to come up, looked okay. This is the following summer, so the second year, things were really flowering, doing well, filling in. And then this was just this previous summer, 2025, was the best it had looked so far. Nice and full of flowers, full of pollinators. And then in fall, lots of food for birds, and we made sure to pile the leaves on the flower beds. And here I just wanted to list a few great starter plants. They're easy to grow, they're really pretty. I also have the last three there are grasses, and those are you might call them well-behaved grasses. They're clump forming. They don't spread too much. A little less scary for some people. But it doesn't hurt to have something that's a little spready or a little aggressive in a wildflower flower bed, because they will then kind of fill the niche or the hole that weeds would otherwise fill. So if you want a little less weeding, it doesn't hurt to have something that's a little aggressive or a little spready. And I think that's all I have. Thanks so much for attending. And if anybody has any questions, I'll let Katie, I'm sure we'll maybe just use the chat function, but I'll let Katie handle that, and I'll stop sharing my screen here.
Awesome. There was a couple questions that were sent to you previously, and I don't know if you've answered them already.
I
So
don't think I have.
Okay,
I have it written
awesome.
down. So somebody had asked what plants would be good for using in a really cycled clay. That's tricky just based on like what's available at places, but anything that does well in a relatively in nature that grows in like a really moist or slightly marshy habitat would work well. So like marsh marigold would probably do well. Blue flag iris grows in marshes, but it can grow just in a flower bed as well. Silverweed would probably work well, but it is pretty aggressive. And then somebody also asked what would grow well in shade. That's a native plant. Again, that's a little tricky just based on what is available. Of course, a lot of plants grow well in the forest understory, but there's most of what people sell is for a sunny spot. But some columbines, there's some native columbines that are really pretty that would do well. Western Canada violet would do quite well. It's a little spready, but for me at least, that's okay in a really shady spot, because sometimes not much else grows in a really shady spot. Northern bedstraw might do okay too. I'm a little less certain on that, but that one, I see it in the forest understory, so it should do pretty well.
Awesome. I do have some questions in the chat. The first 4 from Sam. So, Kelton, where does your passion for plants come from, and what's your background, academic or otherwise?
I guess they might be a similar answer. I have got my master's from the U of S, studying plants, wild plants and their nectaries, the structures that make nectar. And I kind of always had a passion for the outdoors, for nature. But then, yeah, through school, I just found out I really love plants and bugs and things that can be overlooked. They're really fun for me to watch and look at and stuff.
Awesome. The other question is, what's one takeaway you have for a civilian city dweller like Sam?
That it's easy to bring a piece of the prairies into your own yard, even if you don't have a yard. Like I know some people are pretty successful at growing native plants, even on a balcony. They have to do a few things differently, trying to insulate them over the winter, but it's a lot easier than one might think.
Awesome. What is your favorite plant and why?
Oh, it changes every day. Right now, maybe low milkweed. I really like it. It's pretty great for pollinators. Really nice creamy white flowers. I really like it.
Awesome. Jillian has a really interesting question about the milk jug plants. When do you recommend planting the milk jug plants in the ground? Is it after a certain size or after a certain temperature hits?
Oh, when you're planting them like into the ground, I would more so a certain size than a time. They will germinate at different times in the spring. And so they might be tough enough at different times. So just kind of once they have their first true leaves, I'd put them in little groups, not single plants, because you might wreck them getting them out of the milk jugs, in groups into like a littler pot just to get a little stronger. And then once they seem strong enough, maybe after a week or two, put them into the ground.
Awesome. I hope that answers your question, Jillian. And Karen has a really great question about mulch. Do you use mulch in your bed while the plants are getting established, i.e. to manage weeds?
It can be really helpful. I personally don't love mulch. I don't think I think it does work for weeds for a short time. Eventually it just kind of decomposes and weeds will grow on top of it. I didn't really think I enjoyed weeding until I started my native plant bed. And I always found it really fun to take a really close look and see what's growing and what I uncover when I'm on my hands and knees in there. But that's not to say it can't work, especially if you're looking for a more orderly flower bed. Mine is a little messy. It still looks like a nice flowery flower bed, but if you're looking for something a little more like plant here, plant here, plant here, um, then mulch might be a good idea, and it can help with the weeds.
Awesome. Um, if there's any more questions, please feel free to throw them in the chat. I just want to thank the Grandy family and their donation to help us do what we do here at Meewasin and run our volunteer program. So if you're ever in Saskatoon, or if you're in Saskatoon and looking for something to do, come volunteer with Meewasin. Meewasin hosts a bunch of weekly volunteer opportunities. We do these native plug plantings, and we do lots of fun things and remove invasive species, especially in the summer. Other ways to get involved with Meewasin are also with experiences. So joining Kelton on a wildflower walk in the warmer months is always a great way to come and see what Meewasin is up to. So again, if you're not from Saskatoon and want to explore Saskatoon a little bit more next time you're visiting, those are some really fun ways to do any of those things. So if there's any more questions, please throw them in the chat. But if there is no more questions, thank you all for attending. Thank you for Kelton for being our first webinar this year. Again, it was wonderful. I learned so much. So thank you so much for all for attending. I appreciate it. Awesome. Yeah, that'll be the end of it then. But thank you so much for coming. Have a great day, everybody.
Thanks so much, everyone.